What's going on, guys? Mr. Parisi here, and today we're going to be talking about decimals, fractions, and percents. Now, these are things that I'm sure you've seen in your everyday life. So, our first question is, where do you find decimals, percents, and fractions in everyday life? There's a few things that come to mind right away for me. If I'm thinking about decimals, something we've talked about in class already, is decimals show up with money. For example, if I have a shirt that I want to buy that's $25.99, the decimal is right over here. After my decimal, that talks about change. So the decimal point represents where the whole dollars on the left side stop and the change begins. Okay, so that's just one example. Another example of let's take a look at fractions. Fractions show up all the time. One common place is in cooking. So thinking about like, hey, I need 2/3 of a cup of milk. So they show up in terms of measurements all the time. It's very important to make sure these measurements are correct when you're cooking, doing things like that, because otherwise your cookies or your meal or whatever you're making isn't going to turn out the way you want it to. Okay, and then last but not least, we've got percents. Now, where you guys are probably most familiar with percents is grades. You see them every year in school. Percents are your grades, how much correct or how much complete you got on an assignment or a test. So that's one way. A more common way that you might not realize are they also show up as items that are on sale when you're at the store. I know if you're anything like me, I love shopping for sales and getting things at a discounted price. Okay, so percents are used in stores for discounts. So if you are copying down these notes, or if you missed the lesson or you didn't get everything down in class, I want you to copy down what I've got written here. Same kind of thing. You could put a text box in here and type out your notes just like I did. So we've got three things: decimals, we've got fractions, and we've got percents. And they're all in our everyday life. Now, what do fractions, decimals, and percents have in common? They're all three different ways to represent what? Well, all of these things represent part of a whole. What I mean by that is if I have, again, if I'm talking about money, and let's say, for example, I have something that is 75 cents. That 75 cents represents part of a whole dollar, right? We all know that 75 cents is not a dollar. It's less than a dollar. It's close to it. It's 3/4 of that dollar, right? We need another 25 cents to make the whole dollar. We know if we got an 89% on a test, we didn't quite get 100. We didn't get everything correct. So you got most of the test right, but not everything. And then last but not least, if I have half of a pizza, I don't have the whole pizza, I have part of it. So that's where we're going to see decimals, fractions, and percents in everyday life. So now what we want to do is we want to convert between these. This is going to be a common theme for this year, is we're going to be given percents and we're going to have to convert to decimals, or backwards. We're going to have to do things the other way. So first things first, we're going to talk about our rule for converting from a decimal to a percent. So again, my rule is going to be right down here, and we can just type it right in. If I'm starting with a decimal and I want to become a percent, all I have to do is move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So that looks super simple. So let's take a peek at 0.45 and make that a percentage. So first, I'm going to find my decimal point right over here. I'm going to take that decimal point and I'm going to move it twice to the right. So I'm going to go 1 bounce in between the 4 and the 5, 1 bounce next to the 5, and that's where my new decimal point is going to be. So 0.45 is really just 45%. Same thing with my next one. Find your decimal point, move it once between the 3 and the 7, once between the 7 and the 2. That's where my new decimal point is going to be. And now I've changed that decimal of 0.372 into 37.8 Last but not least, 1.99. I'm going to move my decimal point once between the nines, once to the end, and my percentage is now 199%. Now that might look a little bit funny, but we will talk this year about a couple different instances when you're going to get a percentage that is more than 100. So now if I'm working from percents to decimals, my rule is going to be close, or it's going to be similar, but it's not going to be quite the same. We're going to do the exact opposite. So instead of moving the decimal point twice to the right, we're going to move the decimal point twice to the left. 2 times to the left. And again, what that looks like is, let's find our decimal point. For the first one, 7%, it doesn't have a decimal point currently. So if we ever get a number that doesn't have a decimal point, you always just go to the end and assume it is right there at the very end of the number. So I'm going to move it twice to the left. So I'm going to take that decimal point and move it once to this side of the 7 and then once more over here. And then you might be saying, wait, there's nothing filling this space right here. Well, all we got to do is fill that in with a 0. So 7% as a decimal is 0.07. Next one's a little easier. It's got the decimal point there already. We'll bounce it twice, once between the 8 and the 2, once to the other side of the 8. And 82.5% is 0.825 as a decimal. Last but not least, 113%. Again, I got my decimal point right here. Since it wasn't showing up anywhere, it's just at the end of the number. Move it twice, once in between the 1 and the 3, once in between the 1s. So my new number is 1.13. And that is my decimal that represents 113%. Make sure you copy down all these notes because I'll be checking for completion. And last but not least, if we want to find the percentage of a number, this is going to come up all year long. You're given a percentage, and in most cases, you're going to need to change that percent into a decimal. Then what you want to do is multiply. If you can get this procedure down, this year is going to be super simple for you because it shows up all the time. So I'm going to take my percentage here, 30%. This is going to become, I'm going to move it twice, once, twice to the left. If you forget, just look back in your notes. So 30% is really just 0.30. Now, my second part of this is, after I make it a decimal, I need to multiply it by my 75.99. So I'm going to take 0.30 times 75.99. And now we can plug this into a calculator. I don't know about you, but my calculator spit out 22.797. Perfect answer right here. However, if we're talking about money, this might look a little funny because I can't have 797 cents. That doesn't make sense. With money, we always keep 2 numbers. So here brings up our lesson from yesterday and earlier this week is we want to take this and we want to round it to my 100th spot. So I'm looking at this 9. I want to round to this 100th spot. So that's my 9 in the 100th place. I look to the right. The 7 tells me to round up. So my 22.797 actually is just going to be equal to 22 point, that 9 becomes a 10. I'm going to carry my 1, so that just becomes an 80 cents. I rounded up here. 79 became an 80. And that's my final answer. Is 30% of 75.99 is just 22.80. Same thing for number 2 here. Again, we want to change this 7.5%. So again, my decimal points here, I'm going to move it twice to the left, once, twice. Oh no, an opening. I want to fill that in with a 0. So 7.5% is just 0.075, and then I want to multiply by 135.75. Okay, when I do that, I'm going to get an answer. Let's see what we get. I got this to come equal to 10.18125, and the decimal might actually go longer, but that's okay. You only really need to get down like this 10.181 because now I can still round to that 100th spot. Again, if you have more than that, that's fine. So look at my 100th spot. I've got my 8 right there. Is this going to stay in 8? Well, the 1 is less than 5, so that is telling me to stay in 8. So my final answer is going to be 10.18. So if we're talking money here, it's going to be $10.18. All right, so all we did was we took our percentage, we made it a decimal, and then we multiplied to get our final answer there. All right, that's the lesson for today. What you guys have to complete on your own are these practice problems. Convert the following percents to decimals. Oh my God, so easy. Find your decimal point. Move it twice to the left. Look at that, Mr. Parisi just gave you the first answer already. This is going to be 0.90. This one, this page, we want to convert the following decimals to percents. Oh my goodness, find your decimal point. Once, twice, boom. This is 23.1%. And last but not least, you have 3 questions that show up just like slide number 3. So use slide number 3 to guide you through this last slide, slide 6. Take your percentage, make it a decimal, and multiply by the other number. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment on this Google Classroom post, or if you're in class, raise your hand and I'll come over and help you out. Thank you and have a great day.